for rewards, in terms of promotion, in terms of money, in terms of buying a nicer house. For most of us, the reward we really want is attention.
It's terribly boring to be ignored. And I think this is part of the joy and part of the game of contemporary life, isn't it? We're constantly classing others and constantly judging others. And once you start being aware that gestures have meaning, objects mean things, there's no escaping it.
I want to explore how those anxieties affect almost every aspect of our everyday lives. We worry about being made redundant and how it will affect the way others see us. We worry about being passed over for promotion. We worry about being kept waiting. We worry about our colleagues and even close friends doing better than us. Of course, what gives a person status in a given society keeps changing. Throughout history, people have been awarded high status for a wide variety of things. In ancient Sparta, to have high status, you needed to be warlike, aggressive, bisexual, and good at spearing enemies. Among the Inuit, the highest status people were those who could harpoon fish and seals. In 18th century Britain, you needed landed wealth, horses, a languid elegance, and a polished after-dinner dancing technique, whilst in the 21st century, it's fashion, business, sport, or all three.
Though the way that high status is earned may have changed throughout history, the consequences of high status are familiar from really any time or society, and they come down to being treated well, to being treated with respect, and even you could say a kind of love. Just as romantic lovers will enjoy the care and attention of those who love them, so too those with high status will enjoy the care and attention of the world. It's common to assume that the worst thing about low-paid work is the money, just as the money is the best thing about highly paid work. But there's another way of looking at the issue, a way that puts status at the heart of the subject. One could argue that what makes low-paid work really distasteful is the way that one is treated. It isn't the money per se, it's the lack of status involved.
Many low-paid jobs leave us treated as if we didn't properly exist. No one cares who we are and what we think. We're machines for performing a simple task, not humans with as rich and as complex an identity as anyone in a boardroom. Conversely, part of what keeps people working, even once they've made a lot of money, is the respect they receive from others. They're looked up to, esteemed, and sometimes photographed on their way to the shops. Strada is a chain of restaurants owned by a 30-something multimillionaire, Luke Johnson, who made his fortune selling a chain of pizza restaurants. Luke could have retired a long time ago, but he decided to keep working.
I think we are all, in a way, trying to prove ourselves to some audience or another. I remember once reading a survey amongst businessmen, or business people, men and women, and it was trying to tap into the motivations as to why they were in business and why they continue to strive for success even after they've achieved a certain amount. And the single phrase that summed it up in a very short sense was, "I'll show them." And I think an awful lot of people, perhaps in their past, have a school teacher who put them down, or perhaps a parent who said, "You'll never amount to anything," someone who criticised them or didn't believe in their potential. So I think for a lot of people, it's about proving the skeptics wrong.
One of the people who first analysed how we often want money for the status it gives us more than anything else was the great Scottish philosopher Adam Smith. There's a revealing passage in his book, The Wealth of Nations, where he bluntly asks what the rat race is all about.
What is all the toil and bustle for? What are people aiming at with their ambitions and their frenzied pursuits of wealth, power, and preeminence? Are they looking to supply their basic needs? No. The wages of the poorest laborer can supply those. What then are they after? They want to be treated well. They want to be attended to be taken notice of with sympathy, kindness, and approval.
One of the things that makes Adam Smith such a central figure in the history of his subject is his analysis of the reasons why people are accumulating wealth, and his emphasis on the fact that they're doing this because they want dignity and respect, not just fancier clothes or bigger houses.
Jean. How can I forget? How are you? This is Alina.
Hi, nice to meet you, Jean.
What was the name of the guy who had one eye?
Oh,
Boddington.
Few things trigger status anxiety more powerfully than school reunions. This is Haywards Heath School. People gathering here left 30 years ago. It can be agonizing to compare ourselves to people who were once our equals. More specifically, to have to hear of their success. Plenty would agree with Gore Vidal's line, "Every time a friend of mine succeeds, a small part of me dies."
Why did I dress like this? Why didn't I come in jeans like it was this afternoon? Why didn't I wear clothes that were much more relaxed, or even maybe a t-shirt with some political statement on it? And that is very interesting to me, and I think there's a certain status. If I dress well, then chances are people are going to see me maybe as a little more successful, or at least they're going to see me as somebody who is at least reasonably clean-shaven, looks after himself, and has some basic manners.
Why do we care so much about having status? Perhaps because our self-esteem is so dependent on the esteem in which we're held in by others. It's as if we suffer from a congenital uncertainty as to our value, growing confident in ourselves when others value us, and losing confidence in ourselves when we're ignored. The great American philosopher and psychologist William James went so far as to suggest that if we were completely ignored by everyone we came across, it would feel worse than being tortured.
Whilst writing his book, The Principles of Psychology, at Harvard in 1890, James got many of his insights from simply interrogating himself. He noticed how differently he felt on days when he'd been greeted warmly and admired by people, and days when he was ignored and on his own.
What really impressed William James was just how much the views of others influence our sense of ourselves. It seems as if our whole identity is held captive by the judgments that people around us have of us. If they laugh at our jokes, we develop a sense that we're funny. If they praise us, we develop an impression of high merit. But if they ignore us when we walk into a room or lose interest in us after we've revealed our occupation, we're liable to fall into feelings of self-doubt and worthlessness.
There's a part of the child in all of us. What do babies need to thrive? A stark study was made about this in Austria in the 1940s. Two sets of babies were tracked, who both had identical and excellent material care. But one set of babies was looked after by loving, smiling mothers, the other by faceless nurses in a huge state-of-the-art orphanage. It was found that those who were looked after anonymously had severe development problems. The death of some orphans was even ascribed by doctors to nothing less than a lack of sustained attention.
We look for rewards in terms of promotion, in terms of money, in terms of buying a nicer house. For most of us, the reward we really want is attention from whoever it is you're working for. And if you ask yourself, who am I working for? Who do I want to notice how well I'm doing? Is it my partner? Am I still trying to please my own father? Is it my mother? Is it the children whom I want still to see me as, you know? It's sometimes quite interesting to work out for yourself, because you will find, I think, everybody will always find that they are actually looking for somebody's attention and approval. I think we want to feel secure about the people we love and who love us more than we want anything else in the world, including to win $1 million on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. If you said to somebody who wants to win $1 million or who wants to be entirely secure in their love relationships, sexual and non-sexual, I think I know what the answer would be. So that's what we're looking for: security, a feeling of being safely loved and it not being risky.
Just like babies, we need those small signs of care and attention that we capture with the word love. Without this love, we may not die, but we will end up anxious and sad.
You could say that there are two kinds of love that we search for throughout our lives: romantic love and love from the world. Romantic love is familiar enough. It's the stuff of every novel, love song and magazine article. But our search for love from the world is no less intense. But it tends to be spoken of in rather shameful, caustic terms, as though this was something that only a deficient or an envious soul would be interested in. But far from it. Our search for status is linked to something that is as essential to us as light, heat, food and water.
Once we work out how central the need for love is, a lot of things become clearer. From why we go shopping to why we sometimes kill one another. Much of the reason why we go shopping is unconnected to any urgent material need. We often shop in order to persuade the world that we are worthwhile, interesting people. We often shop for emotional rather than practical reasons. A lot of consumption is about acquiring status symbols, material objects whose primary use is psychological. They are objects that signal to the world that we are worthy of dignity and respect. This is the home of Stephen Bailey, a style consultant who worked for many years with Terence Conran, and an expert on why we buy designer goods.
I'm not certain objects make us more lovable, but they certainly make us more interesting. I mean, knowing I was going to be talking to you today, I made a very conscious decision about which of 5 wristwatches I should wear, and I was very, perhaps some would say anxious about what your expectations might be, because I thought you'd be thinking I'd put a Rolex on. And instead, I've chosen a particularly obscure form of antique watch with a brown ostrich strap. Now, I'm not, I suppose to some people this is the most monstrous form of affectation, and they're probably right. But I find it absolutely fascinating that the mere application of a device to one's wrist can entirely change, one's style and the way in which other people interpret me. I'm acutely aware of the status messages which objects convey, and I remember some years ago going through a particularly sort of philosophically trying ordeal with a fountain pen. And because of the way I see the world, I've always been anxious just to acquire, the simplest and best table, the simplest and best whatever, chair, watch, whatever. I had identified a particular brand of fountain pen as, and I write a lot, so pens are quite important to me personally. I had identified this sort of fountain pen as the ultimate of its kind. So I saved up and I bought one and I loved it. And then, to my horror, I found this hitherto exclusive and rare device was becoming more and more popular. And I remember going through this terrible, terrible moments of self-examination, thinking, should I now that my revered fountain pen has become popular, should I hide it away? and not use it. And ultimately I decided, no, the best thing to do was actually just bash on, and brave it, because I thought it was, ultimately it was more arch to hide it away.
The man responsible for the term status symbols was the American sociologist Thorstein Veblen, who wrote a wonderfully witty, even bitchy book called The Theory of the Leisure Class in 1899. Having observed the rich at leisure near his home in Connecticut, he became fascinated by how people acquire certain luxury goods to symbolize their high status. Many clothes were deliberately designed to show that the people wearing them didn't need to work, indeed couldn't possibly do so in something so impractical.
People are often mocked for their interest in luxury goods, luxury cars or clothes, and they're described as being greedy for wanting these things. But I think that's to miss an emotional subtlety of the whole subject. People are attracted to status symbols principally because they want to feel valued.
Most modern cars are very efficient in getting you from A to B. So if there's a continuing appetite for so-called luxury cars, the reason typically has little to do with engineering, ABS brakes and satellite communication. It has to do with wanting to be treated nicely.
What's special about this car?
Well, we're in an environment, it's a very nice place to be. I mean, looking at the dash as a whole, you've got acres of walnut wood, stitched leather top of dash. We also have a feature in here called active seats, which will massage your posterior for long journeys to make sure you don't get a numb bum. iDrive controls the display panel that you look at in the centre. It has the facility to control the navigation system in the vehicle, so you're able to dial up at your front door, wherever you want to go, by road name and house number to that detail.
Right.
And it will take you there.
What's in the tray below?
The tray below is your ashtray.
Right. Even I have one of those.
Even you have one of those.
Tell me, what will owning a car like this do for you as a person?
It would be wrong to sort of compartmentalise owners of cars, but certainly this car is going to say a lot about you. The visual appearance of the car is a strong, muscular appearance to the car. It has a lot of purpose to it. I think owning a car like this gives you a tremendous amount of confidence.
Perhaps it's those who strive hardest to be successful who are most haunted by feelings of failure. Scratch the surface of almost anyone who's made it to the top of their chosen field, and you'll find an unusually vicious fear of being a loser. After all, what need would there be to be so impressive if it wasn't for a fear of being the opposite? There's a sad, emotionally deprived side to upmarket car sales.
Rather than a tale of greed, the history of luxury goods could, I think, more accurately be read as the record of emotional trauma. It's the legacy of people who felt pressured by the insensitivity of others to impress them through the use of material objects. And that really places the onus for what's going on in the world of luxury goods, not just on the buyers, but also on their audience. Because I think it's an uncomfortable but very true fact that the amount of love that you receive from the world is dependent upon the number of status symbols that you can wield.
Signs of how much we crave respect don't only lie in our appetite for shopping. They also lie in our extreme touchiness about whether or not we're being taken seriously. A touchiness that can lead people to challenge each other to fights, and even fatal duels to prove themselves. From its origins in Renaissance Italy until its end in the First World War, the practice of dueling claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people the world over. Status was a matter of honor. The reasons for challenging someone to a duel were often petty in the extreme. In Paris in 1878, one man killed another who had described his apartment as tasteless. In Florence in 1902, a literary man ended the life of a cousin who'd accused him of not understanding Dante. And in France, under the regency of Philippe d'Orléans, 2 officers of the guard fought over the ownership of an Angora cat.
Dueling symbolises a radical incapacity to believe that our status could be our business, something that we decided and then didn't change according to the shift in the views of our audience. The jeweller, what other people make of him, is the only factor in settling what he can think of himself. He can't continue to remain acceptable in his own eyes if those around him think him a fool or an effeminate, a liar or an idiot. He'd rather die by a bullet or a stab wound rather than let unfavourable ideas about him remain lodged in the public mind.
Even though duelling may have gone out of fashion, many disputes and lawsuits continue to be fights about status. 22-year-old Damien Cope became involved in a confrontation after telling a gang member to put away a gun because there were women and children about in a park in South London.
On Burgess Park that day, there was a notorious gang member, and for whatever reason, he felt that Damien disrespected him. He has a confrontation with Damien in Gangthon. That's what a gang member has, a confrontation with you. He produces and lets Damien see he has a weapon. And Damien disrespected him by telling him to put the weapon away and fight him on a one-to-one, and the best man to walk away. And for that, Damien gave himself serious problems. The consequences are then there's a standoff. This person's going to get it. I clearly remember the last time I looked at the clock, it was 9:30, and I had fell asleep. And the next thing I knew was the phone was ringing, and it was Fiona, Damien's girlfriend, and she was screaming down the phone, "Damien's been shot." I jumped up and I said, "What?" She said, "Damien's been shot." I felt suddenly very weak and like something had been zapped from me. It was like I felt Damien leave. I felt him leave my body because I carried this child for 9 months. I grew him for 22 years. And as his mother, I felt him leave. We eventually got to the UCH. Joanne, the nurse, and 2 armed police officers were coming towards the entrance. And I knew by her face what she was going to say, and she just nodded her head and said, "I'm so sorry. He's gone." And I said, "Please take me to Damien. Please, I'm begging you, take me to my son." She took my hand and she took me down a corridor, and I saw my child laying there, and I hugged him. I asked him why somebody had shot him. What did he do so bad for somebody to take your life?
Damien Cope's death is a shocking example of the consequences of a dispute about status. Very few of us pick up guns when we're insulted, but the feeling of vulnerability to others' view of us is sadly only too common. It's worth asking why this anxiety about status should nowadays be worse than it's ever been in history.
Living standards in the West have hugely improved in the last 200 years. There have been major increases in life expectancy, economic opportunity, and wealth generally. And yet, despite these improvements, it's possible to argue that we're today much more status conscious and status anxious than we ever were in the days of lords and ladies and horse-drawn carriages. And for a reason why, we should travel back to history, and there we'll see that for all their many disadvantages, old societies had one big advantage when it came to status. Before the middle of the 18th century, status tended to be handed out in very particular ways. Firstly, it mattered not what you did, but who you were, who your parents were, what kind of background you had. Consequently, there was real cynicism about the character of those at the top of society. They weren't necessarily the best, they were those who'd been handed their privileges on a plate. Secondly, there was very little social mobility. You tended to stay where you were. And thirdly, a related point, people tended to have very low expectations of the kind of life that they could have.
Under the old feudal system, only a very few had ever aspired to wealth and fulfillment. The majority knew well enough that they were condemned to exploitation and resignation. The working classes were considered creatures lacking in reason, and therefore naturally fitted to leading dismal lives, as beasts of burden were to tilling fields. The notion that inequality was fair, or at least irrevocable, was often shared by the oppressed themselves. With the spread of Christian teachings during the later Roman Empire, many fell prey to a religion that taught them to interpret their unequal treatment as part of a natural and unchangeable order. In his book Polycraticus of 1159, the English medieval philosopher John of Salisbury became the most famous Christian writer to compare society to a body, and to use the analogy to justify a system of natural inequality.
In Salisbury's account, every part of a state could be compared to a part of an individual human body. So the ruler was rather like a head, the parliament like the lungs, the treasury like the stomach, the army like the hands, and the working classes in general like the feet, with the peasantry in particular being compared to the toes. Behind this admittedly rather insulting metaphor lay the idea that everyone in society had been accorded an unalterable role. According to the old class system, to ask why some people were allowed to feast in banqueting halls while others were condemned to tilling the soil was an impossible question, almost as impossible as to ask whether God really existed. In the old status system, you either had status or didn't, and if you didn't, there wasn't much you could do about it. The old system was patently unfair. Then gradually, in the middle of the 18th century, a new way of distributing status emerged. A way that gave hope to millions of people and dramatically changed their lives, but at the same time, a way that brought a new level of anxiety to the lives of many. The new system was called meritocracy.
I travelled to America to look at how the creation of the United States in 1776 fundamentally changed the way status was distributed. The constitution of this new country was based on an idea that would come to affect almost every aspect of life right across the modern Western world, the idea of meritocracy.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Those words were first drafted by Thomas Jefferson in June 1776.
In his autobiography written at the end of his life, Jefferson explained that he had spent his career trying to create what he called an aristocracy of talent to replace the old aristocracy of privilege and, in many cases, of brute stupidity. He believed in the infinite perfectibility of every person. Talent belongs to everyone, he wrote. It is as much a part of a man as his arm or his leg. It belongs to everyone, to a greater or a lesser extent.
From the early 19th century onwards, American bookshops grew filled with autobiographies of self-made heroes and compendia of advice directed at the not yet made. Morality tales which told of wholesale personal transformation and the rapid attainment of great wealth and immense happiness. The growth of the mass media helped ordinary Americans to start dreaming that they could one day have the same kind of life as the high-status people they read about. Ladies' Home Journal, Cosmopolitan and Vogue brought an expensive life within the imaginative reach of all. With enough talent, anyone could do anything.
Good morning, everybody. It is 8:30 and time to be in class. Would you please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
We need to have a moment of silence, please.
This is Jefferson High School, just outside Washington, D.C. The pupils here are imbued with the ideals of meritocracy on a daily basis.
Thank you, and have a great day.
This American ideal doesn't, of course, involve a search for equality, merely an initial period of strictly policed equal opportunity. If everyone has had the same chance to go to school and enter university and sit exams, then, so the idea goes, there will be perfect justice in any aristocracy that subsequently emerges among Americans.
The students here really are taught that they could become anything that they wanted in life, that if they work hard enough, if they believe in themselves enough, they can achieve anything. It's an immensely moving idea, one that you can feel energizes the whole of a school like this.
Every person of school age who enters this nation, no matter what their background, is welcomed into a school. And our public school system is that system that has open doors for every person. So you need not be of a certain economic group, ethnicity, geography. If you are living in the United States, even if you're an illegal immigrant, you're entitled to go to our schools, which is an awesome undertaking and very difficult. In some of my schools, we have taken in young people who have actually come straight out of the jungle, and they're maybe 15 years old and they have never been in a school in their life. They are literally illiterate. They do not read or write the language that they speak. And then we, of course, immerse them in English.
Do you think the United States is a genuine meritocracy?
We strive to be. It is an eternal goal, yes.
Do you want your class to win money? Of course you do. Penny Wars is going through Thursday of this week. Put pennies in your class's locker and put other types of coins in other classes' locker. Take away from their total. The winning class will be announced on J-Day. That would be the end of your morning announcements. Have a great day.
The American dream took a long time to filter back to the motherland. As late as the 1930s, over 150 years after the American Revolution, the English writer George Orwell complained that Britain was a country still filled with inequality, corruption, and injustice. But there was about to be a new pressure for change.
What we need now in Britain is a revolution against class privilege. We need to fight against the notion that a half-witted public schoolboy is better at his job than an intelligent mechanic. Although there are gifted and honest individuals among them, we have to break the grip of the old aristocracy. England has to assume its real and just shape.
In March 1936, George Orwell came to Wigan in Lancashire and spent 2 months here. He was appalled by the poverty that he saw all around him. But what appalled him even more were what he felt to be the causes of the poverty. The fact that those who had low status didn't seem to deserve it. He came away calling for a revolution in a class structure. This wasn't to be a violent revolution. He said there wasn't to be red flags and street fighting. But what he wanted, in his words, was a fundamental shift in power towards those in the society who deserve it. Things have largely gone George Orwell's way. Whatever the differences between politicians on left and right, what they're all agreed on is the priority to get a true meritocracy up and running. They may differ about their views on how to do this, but they're all agreed on its central importance. If you come to Wigan today and visit one of its biggest comprehensives, Kingsdown School, you'll find Orwell's ideas for a meritocracy being put into action.
League table came out, right? And once again, we're at the top of the tree. I think we've been there all year.
I think you have.
I don't think there's been any point at which we've fallen off this top position, but there's still a couple of months left in school where we can be caught up if we let our standards drop. Right, we don't want to come second, we need to make sure that we finish at the top.
School was in decline when I first came because attainment was low and morale was pretty low too. And I think the people in the community didn't have a very good image of the school really, and didn't have an awful lot of confidence in the school, and things were a bit depressed.
So what did you start doing as soon as you came here?
Well, what we really had to do was raise morale really and build self-esteem, and those were the key things to do. To make sure that the young people felt valued and that the school was somewhere where they felt that they could succeed. So we took as our motto, your opportunity to succeed.
Can we give those people a round of applause?
3 years ago, 10% of the students who left this school left with nothing. No qualifications at all. Last year, every single student left here with 4 GCSEs, and 96% had 5. Now, that's an astonishing improvement. And then there was a 400% increase in students gaining 5 or more GCSEs at higher grade passes. They have made tremendous strides forward.
The benefits of a meritocratic system have been extraordinary. People who for generations were held down within a caste-like hierarchy have finally been allowed to fulfill themselves in whatever way their talents allow. Race, class, gender, age, all of these have stopped being obstacles to advancement. An element of justice has entered into the distribution of rewards. Alongside meritocratic educational reform has come efforts to promote equal opportunities in the workplace. We're repeatedly told that through effort and diligence, we can make it to the top. This is Chilwood, a factory in Wigan that produces toiletries, packaging, and over 400 sanitary towels a second.
I think anybody who really decides that they're going to go for it, the opportunities may not be in the exact job or position that they're currently occupying, but there will be opportunities round the corner almost. It happens. We've got good examples of it here. People who work hard and go for it will be recognised, because we aren't over-brimming with talent, but, you know, you find it, you've got to use it, and it happens. There's no doubt at all. It happens.
I started with Chilwood in 1986 as a service person, which was for a 3-month trial basis. During that period, an opportunity came available within our SAMPRO division, which I applied for as a service person in that department, more permanent position. I was successful in achieving that position. I then moved on within SAMPRO to become a line operative and then a number 1 operative. About 1994, I was asked to go on to our cling film department of our retail food wraps. I was then offered a position of senior supervisor within our retail foil division. Following that, a position became available in 1998 for a production manager within our personal care department. I was then offered my present position, which is a manufacturing manager. So I've worked my way through the factory from right at the bottom, through every department, up to where I am now.
There's a pride in the way that many people now speak about how they got to the top. A pride that would have been impossible in the days before meritocracy, when you only got places because of who your parents were. Earning good money and having an important job title indicate more positive things about you than they ever used to. But unfortunately, in a meritocracy, having no money and no impressive job title also say many more things about you than they ever used to.
I don't enjoy it at all, tell you the truth. I find it very monotonous, very boring, unrewarding. There's no challenge in the job. It's the same thing day in, day out. You just get used to this routine, and you come in, do the same job you did yesterday, and it's the same thing the day after. And I've had enough of it, in all honesty. Meritocracy is something I'd like to believe in, but from where I am, from my position in life, it's hard to grasp. It's not something I see day in, day out around me. It's a struggle, really, in this environment to try and rise. You feel like you're banging your head against the wall sometimes.
There's a darker side to meritocracy. If the successful merit their success, it necessarily follows that the unsuccessful have to merit their failure. In a meritocratic age, an element of justice seems to enter into the distribution of success as well as failure. Financial failure becomes associated with a sense of shame that the unsuccessful of old had thankfully been spared. Now the question of why, if one's in any way clever, able or good, you're still unsuccessful becomes far more difficult as a question for those of low status to have to answer. The rich at the same time come to seem as though they're deserving of what's going right for them. And this radically undermines the plausibility of a lot of left-wing socialist thinking, based as it was on the idea that the rich are essentially thieving, plundering bastards.
For a flavour of left-wing disaffection and a pint of ale, I've come to a meeting of the Socialist Alliance of Wigan, who meet every week to hear a band and plan the revolution. To them, ideas of meritocracy are little more than pernicious lies.
It seems to me that there's a kind of interesting, potentially sad conflict between the idea of meritocracy and the ideas of the left. A lot of left-wing thinking has been based on the idea that those on the top are somehow there because they've robbed someone, they've exploited someone, or they've generally behaved in unethical ways. It's fairly clear, right? So there's a kind of conflict between meritocracy and the left. And I just want to raise that with you. How do you read that conflict? What does that make you think?
There is no meritocracy in this country. What there is an illusion that people can actually get on in the world. They can get bigger cars, they can get bigger houses. And it's like chasing a dream. That as socialists, we would say that in any society, those that rule society and maintain their rule by a combination of force and fraud. I mean, force being...
And what's the fraud?
Well, obviously the force is the police and bunk it, but the fraud is the idea that somehow you can get to the top, and that's a fraud.
So you think in our current society you can be clever, energetic and diligent and you will not get to the top?
Yes, that's right. Well, the illusion is that actually you can get somewhere. Actually, you can get somewhere, you can get a nice house, you can get a nice car, and you can get all those things, and it's true that people do get those things, but they get them on the basis of debt. They get them on the basis of insecurity. We all want to improve the quality of our lives. But what we find is that the nature of the society we live in militates against the majority doing that.
Socialism used to console by telling us that we personally were off the hook for low status. But the argument has lost much of its force. Winners make their own luck, now runs the harsh modern line.
Living in a meritocracy means living in a highly fluid society where we're no longer divided into lord and peasant, aristocrat and commoner, but where we're said to have a choice about what we want to make of our lives, whether to be a winner or a loser. If we fail in the struggle, we're likely to end up ashamed, angry, but significantly without anyone else to blame for our misfortune. And even if we succeed, we'll know that in these precarious times, our status is unlikely to remain safe for long. In so many fields, we're only now as good as our very last performance. So we've ended up with a curious paradox. Our wealthy, opportunity-filled societies have had the odd effect of hugely raising our levels of status anxiety.
Who has high status today? Who do we all look up to? Whom do the newspapers favour with respectful profiles? Rich people. People who, through their own efforts and merit, have been successful in business, entertainment and the arts. People who make no secret of their achievements. This can seem a dispiriting state of affairs. It can seem shallow or unfair. But it's made all the worse because we often assume there's nothing that can be done to alter the ideals of our society. We tend to think it's natural that certain groups have high status, while others are marginalized. But in fact, it isn't inevitable at all. It's possible to imagine a world where there's been a radical redistribution of respect.